Howdy from Austin, Texas. This is Todd Scarborough. Welcome to the Veteran Executive, the show designed to give you real-world information and actionable insights, which you can apply today to improve your current situation, whatever that may be. We usually talk a lot about transition, whether that's transition out of the uniform, career transition, or transition into a new chapter of your life. We talk about real-world stuff, successes, failures, and the lessons that have been learned. Today's episode is going to really be focused on giving you that origin story and understanding where we come from, where I come from, what my background is, what I've done both in uniform and out of uniform, and my professional career over the past 15 years, and start going through some of those lessons that I've learned and definitely embracing some of the failures that I've faced over the years that have made me into the man, the professional that I am today. The Veteran Executive came out of a lot of work that I've been doing with a lot of the veterans and military spouses, really going back to 2012. So this has been a long time coming. I grew up here in Austin, Texas, which is where I'm back in the Austin metro area now after being gone for a long time, but we'll get into that here. So went to Anderson High School in the northwest of Austin and graduated in 1997. I was an athlete, played football and wrestling, and I helped start the lacrosse team at Anderson back in the late 90s. And after that, I went to Texas A&M University and ended up joining the Corps Cadets and walked onto the rugby team my sophomore year and was really enjoying being an Aggie and all of the tradition and just the culture of that school. And that's really what I fell in love with whenever I was deciding where I wanted to go. So go to A&M and doing okay in all of my extracurriculars, but I did not do great in school. I was later adult diagnosed with ADD and ADHD and didn't know it at the time that I'd had that my whole life at that point. So influenced a little bit of my learning and ability to succeed in the standard school environment. So I always tested very well, but I did not like homework. I didn't like doing the assignments. So at college, where I had new distractions and new temptations and new freedoms, I was more interested in those things than in pursuing my academics. So each semester, each school year, I'd start off the first half of the year, first semester, getting on to scholastic probation because my grades would be terrible. And then second semester, I would buckle down and turn it around by the time the end of the school year came around. So by the time I got to my junior year, after doing that that roller coaster of what we call the SCO-Pro roller coaster, right? After doing that for 3 years, my junior year, we had an event at the school. There was a tragedy, and we had this big bonfire built on campus every year since like the 20s. And this year, unfortunately, that bonfire collapsed, and it was 6 stories tall, and ultimately 12 people ended up dying that night, tragically. And I was there. And so that semester, needless to say, after being there that night and being part of that experience, I was not able to turn my grades around. And so that year I was put on scholastic suspension. So I went home to Austin, and they had told me to get a 2.0 GPA, and then I'd be able to come back. So go back to Austin and enroll in ACC and take a pretty light course load, I thought, but then get back into the same things with old friends and all that good stuff. So ultimately didn't get that 2.0. I got a 1.97, and I took that as a sign that I wasn't meant to be in college at that time. So I packed up my stuff, and I'd been working at a camp in Colorado throughout college, and that summer I had a couple buddies after camp that were moving up to Colorado and to Denver originally, and asked me to join them. They said, "Hey man, you're not going back to school, so why don't you join us?" So I did. Jumped in there with those guys after that, and that was the summer of 2001. So we all know what happened on September 11th. And at that point, my roommate turned to me and he said, "Man, we got to do something." I said, All right. What do you want to do? He said, well, we should join the military. I said, okay. I'm only doing the Marine Corps. My uncle's a Marine. He said, all right. So at that point, we had moved from Denver up to Fort Collins, Colorado, which is where Colorado State University is. So we went down to the recruiting station on September 15th and walk in the front door there. And just give you an idea, as we walked into the door, the gunnery sergeant there got pretty excited. And I could see his eyes light up. And I was like, all right, this guy's excited about some new recruits. Come to find out that he was really excited about my roommate. And I'll describe him for you. He's 6 foot, over 6 foot, probably 6'3", big, tall, fit guy. He's an Adonis, right? He's a former Abercrombie model. He's a former Division II scholarship tailback, just a poster, a recruiting poster kind of a guy. So my roommate jumps up on the scale, and to get into the Marine Corps boot camp, you have to be within the height and weight standards of the Marine Corps, and you have to, you have to be able to do at least three pull-ups to go off to boot camp. So my roommate was in great shape, so he tipped the scales at like 160, something like that, 165. Jumps up on the pull-up bar and knocks out 21 overhand pull-ups just because he can. Jumps down, and Gunny's like, all right, man, I can sign you up right now. Turns to me and he goes, all right, big boy, it's your turn. So to give you an idea what I look like, I'm 71 inches tall, which is 5'11", never reached 6 foot. I'm a ginger, and I had a 6-inch goatee at the time. I had both my ears pierced, and I had hair down over my ears. So I really kind of looked like Chris Farley with a goatee and earrings. So Gunny goes, all right, big boy, it's your turn. So I jump up on the scale, tip it at like 275, something like that. Jump up on the pull-up bar and can barely get one. Jump down, and I'm sweating and out of breath. And the Gunny looks at me, and he laughs at me, and he goes, dude, you got to lose 40 pounds before I can even sign you up. No way. So my roommate turns to me. He's like, dude, you really want to do this? I said, yep, let's do it. So next day we go in and we quit our jobs. I was selling sofas and he was selling mattresses. So we quit our jobs and he got me on a high protein, low carb diet, got me working out and running again. And as an athlete in high school and college, I knew how to do all these things. But I realize now, or in hindsight, that really what had happened is I was eating and drinking my emotions after that first serious failure of my life of failing out of college. So anyways, get back in shape, go back to the same recruiting station. My roommate had gone down and enlisted the day before. We're reservists, so there was only certain jobs available. He ended up getting intelligence, and I'll tell you more about my job in a minute. So I go down, same Gunnies there, and I walk in. At this point, I had taken out the earrings. I had shaved off the goatee. I got a high and tight haircut. And walk in and tip the scale, probably about 225, something like that. Jump up on the pull-up bar and knock out 15 overhand pull-ups because I can. Jump down, and Gunny's like, man, I could sign you up right now. Like, all right, Gunny, but you don't even recognize me, do you? He goes, what? So I don't know if y'all remember back in the 90s, there was a heavyweight boxer, a big old white dude named Butterbean, and Butterbean had a shaved head. And so when I'm handing the Gunny my driver's license, it's still a fat picture, and I've got a shaved head. So I hand it to him, and he goes, holy shit, Butterbean, that's you. So I promise this story accelerates from here, but I just like to tell that piece because it shows a good piece of who I am, and when I put my mind to something, I'm going to go and get it. And then ultimately, I do start to pull my head out whenever I do make mistakes and fail. So go off to boot camp, and I'm loving it. My roommate hates it. And I realize it's a mind game. I realize that there's nothing we can do to win and be enough until we graduate and we're actually Marines, and then we'll have their respect. So succeed in boot camp and then get off to MOS school, which is where you learn your job, for any of my non-veteran friends listening. That's where you learn your job for the military, and that was out in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And I was learning to be in a Marine Corps electrical repair specialist working on generators. I really enjoyed that job. Started learning about electronics and how electricity works and all that good stuff. And then while I was there, my mom had been transferring my brother into Texas A&M from a junior college, and she had met a dean of a college and told him my story, and he was moved. And he said, have him give me a call, and we'll talk about getting him back in. So I was thrilled that I could get back into Texas A&M. So transfer my unit while I'm still in MOS school from Colorado, where I had enlisted, down to Texas, which is possible when you're in the reserves. And I knew that unit, my Colorado unit, was what we call a wing unit, which is planes and helicopters. And in the Marine Corps, it's kind of considered a pretty lax job or an easy job compared to the grunts. The unit I transferred to was an infantry unit, so I became an OJT, on the job trained grunt. And after never using my train job, my MOS job, a day in the Marine Corps. So that was fun. And that's where I started to learn the value of on-the-job training. So I'm in the reserves, and now I'm a squared away Marine, and I'm back at school at Texas A&M. I met my amazing wife 2 weeks prior to going back to school. Had been living with at my grandmother's house in Austin, and I met her, and we started dating, and did the long distance thing. So go back to school. Now I'm a squared away Marine. I'm getting way better grades. I'm the stinky Marine at the back of the class who runs to all of his classes and is stinky and sweaty and nasty. But I got a beautiful lady at home, and I don't care, and I'm just there to do the job. So during that time, things were kicking off in Iraq, and we knew we were headed that direction. And so in 2004, Jamie and I got engaged in April, and I was planning to graduate that summer, double up on my classes, and get done with school so that we could get married. And in June of 2004, get our warning order to go to Iraq. So that basically means get your stuff together. You're going to be shipping out soon. So shift the plans and get ready to go. So shortly thereafter, we shipped off to March Air Force Base, 29 Palms in California, to do what we call the ramp up and get ready to go and do a bunch more training in the desert and all that good stuff. So after training for a while, we shipped out to Iraq in August of 2004. And when we touched down, we thought we would be on base security and those sort of things, but we ended up getting attached to an active duty light armored reconnaissance unit, which is a unit that's made up of big vehicles with big guns, and they need infantry guys like us to go and help them on their missions. So we were attached to them and ended up going and fighting Fallujah and Ramadi and all those hot spots in 2004 to 2005. Got to live the infantryman's dream and defend America and do that grunt job. Picked up a little bit of PTSD along the way, and which is a part of my life now, and something that I get to deal with and live with and help others to live with. So, but I didn't know that at the time. Get back in 2005. I get back in March of 2005. Jamie graduated college in May of 2005, and we got married in June of 2005. And then I was diagnosed, I think, in July or August of 2005 with PTSD. We just knew that I was different than when I left. I had left this happy-go-lucky college kid, and I'd come back as a pissed-off, angry Marine. And I didn't know quite why it was at the time. Neither did she. All we knew was something was different, and I needed some help. So very thankful that she pushed me and others pushed me to go, mainly her, pushed me to go and get help. And so after going to the VA, realizing that the lines were pretty long, and I saw a bunch of older guys and gals that needed to get their services, so I just went and found a civilian PTSD specialist in Austin and worked with him for a period of about 6 months, going in intensive therapy, I should say, twice a week for 6 months. And he was a specialist in PTSD, and the process that he used, which is now quite prominently known, but at the time was pretty new, or at least that's what I thought. It just wasn't very widely used yet, I guess, at the time. but it's EMDR. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprogramming. It's all about remapping the neural pathways within the brain through some physical processes that allow for the disassociation of negative emotions that are typically associated with our trauma. And so it's a pretty intense therapy process because you have to focus a lot on the most traumatic experiences that you've had and processing those emotions that you're feeling. And living in those emotions for a bit. So it's quite uncomfortable at first, but over time, it really does. You get to the point where you can tell your story, your PTSD root story, if you will, without the negative emotions. So at some point on this show, we're going to get into that story. I'm going to save that for another day. It can be viewed as kind of dark content or sad content, and I don't want to bring anybody down. So I'm going to think long and hard about what exactly is the most responsible way to do that. But we'll cover that. We'll cover that in future. Anyways, so getting back into therapy, that it really got me on the right track. To realize that I wanted more in life for me and Jamie, for my new wife, and had the choice to go back to school or to get into work, and thought about it long and hard. I had about 36 hours to go. And after talking to a friend of my father's who was a fellow Marine, he was a Vietnam era Marine. And when he got back, he got a job selling copy machines for Xerox, and sat down with him. And at that point he had built quite an empire of, he had a private jet charter company. He was selling jets. He was selling, private jets. He was selling helicopters. He was doing all kinds of cool stuff. And all of that had originated from his career learning sales, because he said, that's where I learned business. And so I decided to do the same thing. So I went and found a job with a company called Konica Minolta, a Japanese copier manufacturer that was opening up a branch in Austin for the first time. And they had this hotshot sales guy, who had been their top guy in Dallas, young, hungry, eager, very capable young man, 32 years old. And he came down to start that branch. And he was my first ever professional boss. And he taught me so much. He taught me that sales is not about hitting quotas and cashing big commission checks and prospecting and annoying people and being that sleazy guy or gal that's just trying to get a check or whatever. He taught me that sales is really about relationships, and it's really about listening more than it is about talking. And it's about, when you are talking, your time is filled with good, thoughtful questions that are going to make your customer think and that are going to drive that conversation in a positive direction. And then once you've got all that information, understanding their challenges and their pains, you dig into your bag of technology and services, and you craft a solution that's going to solve those problems for them. So that's what sales is really about. And learning it that way at a very early time in my career, which I now know we call solution selling or consultative selling, as opposed to product selling or transactional selling, which are a lot more about, the metrics and the dollars and those sort of things, instead of understanding the outcomes that we're trying to drive. So I had tremendous success there. Made six figures for the first time, with a base salary of like $26K. Fell in love with sales and with new technologies and with learning new technologies and new sales methodologies and really the craft of sales. So at that point, after the success I had there, got to, one of the top reps out of 650 nationwide, won a trip to Dublin, Ireland, and just really enjoyed that job. But then I was recruited over to Dell, and being a native Austinite, if you get the opportunity to go work at Dell, it's not in Austin, it's in Round Rock, which is right outside of Austin. But Dell is one of those Austin companies that we have, we're all very proud of that story. And so to get a chance to go and work there early in my career was a great opportunity. So jumped over there and got the chance to start learning about IT, and then in understanding the complexities and intricacies of technology, I was able to learn how to do senior selling and working with the C-suite, right? CEO, CXO, whatever it is, and understanding how they think, how they make decisions, what kinds of information they need in order to move the ball forward, all those kinds of things. And I also learned how to be a part of a team. I also got to close my first multi-million-dollar PO. Just tremendous, being surrounded by super senior people that had been 15, 20 years in their career and were really at the top of their game, and took the time to invest in me. These are people who are now, in the C-suite or are presidents of divisions in some of the biggest logos, and I got to work with them so early in my career. It was really great. So from there, I was recruited back into the copier industry. Now I had a base knowledge of IT, and that was at a time when the copier industry was bringing IT services and what they call managed network services at the time, M&S, bringing managed network services into their existing clients that had been buying copiers and printers from them for years. And they now wanted to, increase the revenue base and increase the value add to the customer by bringing IT services in. Managed services is what we call it now. And so I brought my IT knowledge in and my consultative selling knowledge, which was the more valuable piece to them because they had a bunch of sellers that were transactional sellers. And when you're selling services or you're selling things as a service or cloud, what we now call cloud technologies, you've got to be able to be more consultative and understand, listen more than you talk. So started building a practice for them and got to build my first back office system automation and pricing tool, and started learning more about business automation and how to innovate within the bounds that you're given within a small business. A lot of cool stuff. Learned a lot about management and how different management it is in the civilian world than it is in the military, specifically the Marine Corps. For me, I learned the hard way that you can't manage high-performing salespeople the same way that you manage combat Marines. After running off a few of my top people with a too tough management style, I had another great boss who invested in me and took the time to help me understand that when we say mission critical in the civilian world, it doesn't mean the same thing as what it meant when you were in uniform. I was just talking to a mentee about this today. There are a lot of definitions in the civilian world that are different than the way that we look things in the military. And mission critical and urgency and emergency, those are some of those words. And we'll save that for another post, or another video, another show. Get back to this story. So now I've become a practice builder, and I'm known for that in the Colorado area, and was recruited to a couple of other companies in the copier world, and then into the IT world, in HP VAR, a value-added reseller, and helping them build a cloud practice. And then about, almost 10 years ago now. Yeah. Almost 10 years ago now, I found, or I should say it found me, this telecom industry. And I was brought in. At the time, I was a director. I was running a team. I was building a practice, and I was offered an opportunity to be more of an individual contributor, but an overlay, because what they needed in telecom at that time was similar to what they had needed in copiers, which is someone who has an understanding of how to sell a different way. Because with this new technology, what was being added to telecom at that point was cloud phone systems, really, to begin with, and then getting into cloud infrastructure as a service, data services and data file storage, and a lot of the infrastructure type cloud that we were selling back then. So come into telecom as an overlay, as what they called an SME, subject matter expert. I still to this day don't call myself an expert. Other people tend to do that, but I don't call myself that. I got a lot more to learn. And if I ever call myself an expert, then I should probably retire. I'm a long way from that at this point, 41. So in telecom, the similar thing was needed. They needed to build a practice around solution selling and consultative selling. So I said about that, and my focus there was a little bit different because I was an overlay for the sellers, but which I had been doing for my sales team as well as a manager and director. But I was also, for the first time, really focused on what we call channel business or partner business. And so in that, I learned how to work with entrepreneurs, consultants, resellers, distributors, what we call in the telecom world master agents, or similar to broker agents in the real estate world. And that was a great exercise because being a practice builder, I was used to working with the owners and the principals of the company. And so that was a natural slide into channel and partnerships because I was dealing with principals there as well, the owners of the business. And so did that, ended up doing that for did a little bit of director work in telecom, but it was mostly, and even got a VP job. That's one of those failures we're going to talk about. Not in full detail today, but so along the way there, I do want to highlight a couple of things that I normally don't call out in this story. In 2014, I started drinking really heavily. And it was also at a time when my stress level was increasing at work because I was being promoted and more responsibility, more stretch area, right? Like areas where I didn't have all the skills, but I was learning them in real time. And then the stress that I was feeling at work, I was bringing that home. And so then there was more stress and tension at home. We had 2 young babies. I was traveling 40, 50% of the time and ended up getting a DUI. And that was a real wake-up call at that point that I needed to slow down. And so I did for a while and ended up getting a different job, moving away from that company. That company wasn't the best situation for me personally, just because I was taking things personally and not being in my right mind because of all the alcohol abuse. I wasn't processing well in a healthful way. So moved into a job, preemptively promoted, and I think everybody that was involved in that back then would say the same thing about this story, that I was preemptively promoted to a VP position at 36. Is that right? Yeah, 36. I pushed for it. And I got what I asked for. But with that came expectations of a vice president that I was not prepared to fulfill. And in my position of alcohol abuse and being consumed by the alcohol, I was not in the right mind to give my full effort and the full value that the company had signed up for in me. And so that was the first time in my career that I was ever fired. We'll get into the details of it, what happened on that. It had to do with alcohol. It had to do with Vegas. I can laugh about it now because my wife is a wonderful woman and she's still with me. So otherwise I don't know that I'd be laughing about it. But we'll get into the details of that down the road because there's a lot of good lessons there, not just about alcohol, but also about pride and humility and knowing your own limitations. So that happened in 2015, and that was the first time I had lost a job. And I'll tell this part because it's important for this first episode. We were in a small market. We had moved from Denver to Reno, Nevada, or Sparks, Nevada. And after losing that VP job while being there, I was a big fish in a small pond. Nobody was hiring a VP of cloud solutions in Reno, Nevada at that time. So there also weren't as many remote jobs as there are today. So I ended up taking a job. My sister-in-law, her and her fiance worked at a call center that sold refurbished copier and printer toner online. Talk about some humble pie, man. I went down to an hourly job, getting a little bit of commission, slinging toner over the phone. Humble pie. I learned a lot about myself during that time. So I'd work there during the day, and then at night I'd go be with the family, and then when they go to bed, I'd get at the other full-time job of finding a job back in my industry. So I did, and God is good and provided an opportunity where I was able to do some work in Reno for an Austin-based company, and after a while working with them and providing some good success there, I was able to negotiate a relocation package back to Austin. And so we relocated in 2016, or they relocated us, I should say, in 2016 back here to Austin, and we built a house about 25 minutes from where I grew up, and worked with that software company a little bit longer, and then I was fired for the second time in my career. And again, it had to do with my alcohol abuse and how that was impacting my performance in the job and my relationships in the job. And at the time, I probably was had a little bit of a grudge with the people, the executives involved. But now, as I look back on it more healthfully, I realized they did the right thing for me and for them. And I had no business continuing to occupy a seat in that business. And that's been the truth in each of the jobs that I've lost. So from there, I was able to leverage my network and get into another job that was a downgrade from where I had been in the last two roles. I moved. I had this rapid acceleration up to VP, and then a very rapid deceleration down to what I would consider a frontline entry-level job, slinging toner, and then started climbing my way back up. But it was a slow climb. And so landed with a great company out of California. They put a lot of trust in me, and I was still in the grips of my abuse, my alcohol abuse. And so I didn't give them what they deserved either. And I also had the delusions of this idea that it would be a good idea for me to start a side hustle company that I've been dreaming of since 2012. That company happened to be VetExec, which stands for Veteran Executive. And that's ultimately what this show has come from today. But in 2017, I tried and failed miserably to launch it as a side hustle. The idea was for it to be an OJT pathway company into technology. And at the time, there weren't the programs that there are today to help those companies get started. So three quick lessons that I learned about myself, or learned about entrepreneurship really in that time. Number one, I learned that I am a better co-founder or head of some sort of division within a startup than I am a founder trying to do it on my own. Number two, I learned the importance of those those first 10 or first 20 hires within a startup. And the fact that definitely sub 10, those first 10 need to be more entrepreneurial or at least entrepreneurial folks, and not folks that have an employee mindset. And I had brought 4 people in three people. One was entrepreneurial, and the other three were employee-minded, and quite frankly, weren't ready or willing to do the work. So, the third piece that I learned is that I can't launch a company like that as a side hustle, and so I learned to pivot that business into what it is today, which is more of an advisory. And so that's what I do in my own time, usually late at night when I'm also recording these videos, or on the weekends when I'm not hanging with my family. And then my day job today, after all this time of being in the industry and having been on the channel side, the partner side for the past almost 10 years now, this past year I was promoted in 2020 in April back to the sales side. So I've come full circle in my career, and I'm now back to the individual contributor role for what's really just a great company called Nice and Contact. We're a global leader in our industry, and the people I get to work with, the value of the product, the customers, it's just a tremendous opportunity. And it's fun to be a part of an industry leader. In the past 15 years of a career, I've been with big companies, small companies, winning companies, losing companies. I've been with people that are leading a particular segment of the market, but I haven't been with a market dominator like the one that I'm with now, and have been for almost a year and a half. Well, over a year and a half. My wife Jamie and I have now been married for 15 years, just celebrated 15 years in June. Been together for 17, and we've got an awesome son, Asher, who's 7, and our beautiful daughter, Jovi, is 5. And so, that's my story. That's Todd Scarborough in a nutshell. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on or questions, or if you want to dig in on particular pieces of my story or any of those sort of things, let me know. This is a show that's built for you, and if you see something or hear something that you find value in, I want to take the time to stop and dig into it and address it for you, because if it's something that's important to you, chances are it's something that's important to somebody else in our community. And so I find that addressing things in real time is usually the best and most productive way to do it. So, it's going to be fun. These shows are going to be focused on taking the experiences and parts of the story that you just heard from me, as well as from others. I'll be bringing in my friends and work colleagues and business partners and sales partners and mentors of mine, mentees of mine. I'll be bringing in founders and co-founders, and mostly folks that are going to be in the veteran space or that are already active in the veteran community. So they may be civilians, but they're doing something for our community. And we're just going to talk about things that are important to you. And I'm going to be getting my topics from my veterati mentees and from my other veteran friends and all the different veteran groups that I'm a member of and involved in. And just going to try and focus on relevant and resonant content for you that's going to help you and give you real world stuff that you can use today. So please be sure to smash that subscribe button down below. Make sure and hit the bell icon so you can get the notifications when I put out another episode. I'm going to be looking to put a new one out every 1 to 2 weeks early on here. As I learn how to do more of this video and audio editing. This is the first time for me, so be patient. These might look a little rough at the beginning, but I'll get better at over time. So please subscribe to my channel. Please comment. Please share and like and do all the good things. Tell your friends about us and send them our way. If you've got any questions, hit me with a DM. And my email and all that good stuff will be on there. So, hope this has been helpful for y'all and beneficial. And I also hope that you have a blessed day and that you'll come back next time. Talk soon. Thanks.